somewhere north of Houston, in a rural county about 45 miles from downtown. Elon Musk says he is going to build the largest and most valuable building on Earth. It is called Terafab. More than 100 million square feet of manufacturing space. That is roughly 10 times the floor area of the Tesla Gigafactory in Texas, and more than 10 times the biggest fab TSMC has ever built. Logic chips, memory, advanced packaging and testing, all of it under a single roof, something the semiconductor industry currently spreads across multiple continents and dozens of specialized suppliers. $16.8 billion just for phase 1. The chips are meant to run humanoid robots, driverless taxis, and data centers in orbit. And here is the part that does not appear in the announcement. As of this recording, there is no groundbreaking. There is no completion date. And the filing SpaceX submitted to the SEC describes the entire project as a general framework, with no binding commitment requiring anyone to keep participating. So what did Grimes County actually agree to? Every number in this story descends from a single claim, that the companies run by Elon Musk will soon need more than a terawatt of computing power per year, more than the entire global semiconductor industry can currently supply. That is not a chip industry figure. It comes from space. In February of this year, SpaceX acquired xAI, folding the Grok models and the platform formerly known as Twitter into the rocket company. The combined business was valued at $1.25 trillion. Days later, SpaceX asked the FCC for permission to launch up to 1 million solar-powered satellites, operating as data centers in orbit, between 500 and 2,000 kilometers up. The argument behind this is genuinely interesting. Data centers on the ground are throttled by two things: electricity and cooling. In orbit, you get near constant sunlight and a vacuum that radiates heat away for free. The Musk framing is that global electricity demand for artificial intelligence cannot be met on the ground without imposing hardship on communities and the environment. To fill a constellation like that, you need chips, enormous quantities of chips. In a radiation-hardened variant SpaceX calls D3, add the Tesla side of the ledger, the AI-5 and AI-6 processors for Optimus robots and cybercabs. And the position is that no existing supplier can serve these companies at the volume they need. So he says he will make them himself. Here is the first thing that does not fit. Chip supply at Tesla is not actually a problem right now. The AI-5 processor is already in production at the Samsung fab in Taylor, Texas. Last year, Tesla signed a $16.5 billion agreement with Samsung covering the next generation AI-6. TSMC reportedly covers the rest, and nothing in the Terafab announcement says that AI-5 or AI-6 chips will be made there. The second thing that does not fit is who is actually building it. In April, Intel joined the project as foundry partner, bringing its 18A process, the most advanced chip-making capability currently operating on American soil, which reframes the whole things. Terafab is not really Tesla and SpaceX learning to build chips. It is Intel building chips on land the Musk companies are paying for, and Intel needs this badly. The Intel Foundry division lost $10.3 billion in 2025. Terafab is the high-volume anchor customer that justifies continued investment in its next process node. The dependency runs in both directions. Intel needs Terafab to prove that the foundry business works, and Musk needs Intel process engineering, because his companies cannot fabricate advanced silicon themselves. On May 20th, SpaceX filed its prospectus with regulators. 3 weeks later, it went public. The offering priced on June 11th at $135 a share, more than 550 million shares, roughly $75 billion raised, the largest IPO ever recorded, past the Saudi Aramco mark that had stood since 2019. On its first day of trading, the stock jumped more than 19%, putting the company near $2.1 trillion. Around 30% of those shares were set aside for retail investors, ordinary people, several times the allocation a public offering normally gives them. So it is worth reading what that prospectus actually says about Terafab. SpaceX states that it has agreed with Tesla on a general framework for the future development of Terafab. It then adds that any specific projects under that framework will be subject to separate negotiations and agreements, including development timelines, milestones, and capital expenditures, and have not yet been determined. No finalized split of intellectual property, no obligation on Tesla, on Intel, or on anyone else to continue. The 308-page document contains no risk factor written specifically about Terafab at all, folding it instead into a general warning that some initiatives may not achieve commercial viability. Now hold that against the numbers in the same document. SpaceX claims a total addressable market of $28.5 trillion. $26.5 trillion of that is attributed to artificial intelligence. Terafab is load-bearing for that figure, and it is disclosed as a handshake. Then watch the project move. In March, it was announced for Austin, 2 facilities on the north campus of the Tesla plant there. It is now in Grimes County, 45 miles from Houston. In the spring, SpaceX told the state it would initially invest $55 billion. The confirmed first phase is $16.8 billion. That is a $38 billion gap between what was pitched and what was committed, and the written agreements ask for less than either number. SpaceX has publicly said it is committed to at least $55 billion. What the signed county documents actually require is $5 billion by 2030 and 1,800 permanent jobs by 2035. Local reporting notes that there are no penalties if the company reaches 90% of those goals. The press release says more than 3,000 jobs. To understand whether 100 million square feet is ambitious or unserious, you need something to measure it against. TSMC is spending roughly $165 billion to build 6 fabs in Arizona. Those 6 combined are a fraction of the stated Terafab footprint, and no fab on Earth is built to output a terawatt of compute a year, because that unit does not come from the chip industry at all. The supply chain analyst Ming-Chi Kuo identified 3 structural execution risks back in May: excessive scope, a compressed timeline, and a shortage of chip engineering talent. On that last point, he noted that the Apple Silicon Engineering Group is larger than the Tesla and SpaceX chip design teams combined, by dozens of times, while the Terafab engineering window is shorter and its scope is broader. The counter-argument is the record. Reusable orbital rockets were widely called impossible. Starlink now serves millions of customers worldwide. Vertical integration has worked for this man repeatedly, at scales that other people said were unreachable. That deserves to be said plainly. But the honest response is that semiconductor manufacturing has a different learning curve. It is process chemistry, accumulated over decades by organizations that have done almost nothing else. Rockets reward iteration you can watch explode. Fabs reward yield you can only measure statistically years later. Now to the county. In June, Grimes County Commissioners voted 4-1 to approve a reinvestment zone and a full tax abatement. The one commissioner who voted no said the abatement went too far, and that SpaceX had not been transparent enough with the county. Then in August, at a packed public meeting, an attorney for SpaceX told residents that the effective abatement is closer to 78%, and that the company will pay the county $20 million a year for 35 years, $710 million in total, which he noted exceeds the $14 million that Tesla paid Travis County last year. Both figures are on the public record. They have not been reconciled. Separately, 2 small school districts voted 5-2 on all 4 phases to cut school property taxes for 10 years per phase. One of those districts serves the town of Iola, population just over 300. Phase 1 alone represents nearly 7 times the entire tax base of that district. Before those votes, SpaceX told board members that without the agreements, it would likely have moved the project to another state. Then there is water. SpaceX says that Terafab will not deplete local supplies, will not draw down the Navasota River, and that the site was chosen for its ability to store rainwater rather than for groundwater access. Residents point out that the company had already purchased the river pumping station and the riverfront frontage before commissioners were told the plan. And there is power. Rather than drawing from the Texas grid, SpaceX will build its own natural gas plants on site, with very large battery arrays. That is a real answer to the question of consumer electricity bills. It is also worth noticing what is absent. Tesla is a partner on this project. Tesla sells solar panels and batteries, and in June launched a 16 gigawatt virtual power plant marketed directly at data center operators. None of that appears in the Terafab power plan. Musk personally bought a gas turbine company in July for around $1 billion. SpaceX has committed more than $2.8 billion to gas turbines over the next 3 years. He owns roughly 20% of Tesla. He owns roughly 100% of the turbine company. Meanwhile, xAI, now a SpaceX subsidiary, is being sued over its use of unpermitted gas turbines in one of the most polluted parts of the country. A county judge spent 6 weeks drafting a resolution that would create a clearer process for industrial projects of this size. Commissioners tabled it, and after one of the school board votes, a resident put it plainly: "Why ask us to speak if you are not going to listen? Terafab is more real today than it was in March. There is a county, a site, permits in motion, signed agreements, and company representatives sitting in a room, answering questions from the people who live next door. That is a great deal more than a slide in a keynote. But almost everything load-bearing here is still a projection. The demand number comes from a satellite constellation that has not launched. The manufacturing capability comes from a partner whose foundry lost $10 billion last year. The financial scale comes from a filing that calls the whole arrangement a framework. And there is no completion date because one has never been given. What has already been transferred is the abatement, the grant, the water rights, and the land. So there are 3 things worth watching: whether construction actually starts within months, as promised, whether that $5 billion floor is met by 2030, and whether orbital data centers begin operating in 2028, as the filing suggests. Because if they do not, the terawatt that justifies all of this stops being a forecast and starts being a story. Grimes County has already voted.